If you're in the market for an electric family crossover and you've got around £45,000 or £500 per month to spend, you've got a huge number of options these days. And these are two of the latest, the Honda NY1 and the Kia Niro EV. So here we have two electric family crossovers, or, that's what their makers call them, but let's face it, they're family hatchbacks, aren't they? Slightly high riding, but still hatchbacks. Both of them are 4.4 metres long. You get slightly over 60 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery in both with a 201 brake horsepower electric motor. And that means that you've got the WLTP official range of 256 miles in the Honda and 285 miles in the Kia. Now, on list price, the Kia is a no-brainer because it starts at about £37,000, so way cheaper than the Honda, but that's because the Kia has a much broader range of trims to choose from. However, spec for spec, if you want the heat pump, the electric seat adjustment, the leatherette upholstery, the sunroof, the keyless entry, all of the stuff that the Honda gets as standard even on the cheapest version, you are looking at a top spec Kia. So actually spec for spec, they're much closer on price than you might first imagine. However, list price is one thing, but most buyers will pay monthly and Honda's very good for that. On a standard 3-year PCP finance deal, the Honda comes in at close to or under £500, even if you go for top spec Advance with its standard glass roof, while the Kia Niro EV4 costs over £600 per month on the same terms. Both have long warranties. The Kia gets a 7-year 100,000 mile cover for the car and battery, while Honda offers a 5-year 90,000 mile warranty on the vehicle and an 8-year 100,000 mile cover for the battery. So that's the money stuff, but what about practicality? Well, I have to say the Honda's not great on that front. So the boot, it is big enough for a small buggy or maybe a small dog, that kind of thing, that's fine. But in the context of its rivals, it's really poor. So you get 344 litres of space, 361 if you go for the lower spec car. But there's no cleverness to it that you might expect from Honda. The seats don't slide, there's not even any through loading. It's just not as big as you might expect. So the Skoda Enyaq iV is still our favourite family EV in this class. Costs the same as the Honda and it's got a 585 litre boot for some context. Well, this is actually smaller than the boot you get in a Golf too. And in the Kia, I might add. So it's just pretty disappointing, really. Still, you do get underfloor cable storage, those seats fold 60/40, and there's also plenty of room for two adults to sit very comfortably. In fact, the Honda has a fraction more legroom than the Kia. It is all pretty nice up front in the Honda. I do think the material quality in here actually is slightly better than in the Kia, just the sort of finish that you get on the dash and this kind of thing. But also, the sort of price that you're asking for this Honda, well, you're getting really close to BMW iX1 and Mercedes EQA territory. In fact, you can get those cars for this price. Granted, they don't have the equipment that the Honda does, but even so, I think it's going to be tough to sort of sit in either of those and sit back in this and feel like you're getting good value, because they do have just much nicer interiors. I'd also say, even though you get electric seat adjustment on all of the Honda NY1 trims, you don't get lumbar adjustment, which really annoys me, because I do feel like you could use a little bit more lower back support. And I don't know, there's some quite quirky aspects of here. You get these funny little sort of rotary controls for the vents up here. I'm fine with that. Massive wing mirrors. It's got manual shade releases in the back, which is kind of crazy. So you kind of just have these big flappy shades hanging about that you don't know what to do with. So that's all very odd. So there are some real quirks in this car, but generally quite a nice driving position. I like the nice slim steering wheel. It's not bad up here. It's nice. The huge 15-inch touchscreen and digital driver's display dominate everything in the NY1. The climate controls are fixed on screen and never disappear, so they're pretty easy to use, and the rest of the screen is your window to everything, has usefully large icons and decent graphics, although I do wish that the nav map could expand to fill up more of the screen. Still, this is one of the easiest systems to use. Of course, you get built-in nav with charger search function, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So because we've got the low spec 2 car here on test, you don't get the powered boot lid that you do on the 4 that you'd have comparable to that Honda, but you do get a decent sized boot, 475 litres. You can see that it's got a longer floor than in the Honda, so it's not too bad actually, and you do get a tiny bit of storage up front under the nose of the car as well, so that's all good. It is just, it's a usefully bigger load space than you get in the Honda. The seats in the Kia don't do anything clever either. They fold flat 60/40 and offer plenty of space in the back, but still really decent for the average family car. I like it in the Kia. I think it's quite a smart looking interior. I like the swoopy architecture and I like this smart sort of interesting steering wheel design, I think it's pretty cool. I don't think it's got quite the material quality that the Honda does, but that's also not helped because obviously this is a lower spec 2 car. If you went for the 4, then you'd have the leatherette upholstery, you'd have the sunroof, you'd have all the stuff that you get on the Honda really. You get rear heated seats in the Kia 4 as well. And actually I prefer the touchscreen in here because I know it's not as big as in the Honda, but ultimately I just find it easier to use. All the shortcut buttons are there on the home screen, the screen responds nice and quickly. It's just more straightforward and a bit less, you know, really in your face. The Kia's touchscreen gets all of the same features as the Honda. It's quick to respond and clear to see even in bright daylight, and while both of these systems are good, it is the Kia's that's just a touch easier to use. Let's stick with the Kia and find out what it's like to drive on the road, and I can report back that it's very nice. It's really comfy actually. So this test car is on 17-inch wheels, and I would highly recommend you do get those if you possibly can live with one of these lower spec cars, because it does help with the ride comfort. So it feels really nice and cushy. It's pretty quiet. It probably helps with the range on this car as well, which I'll talk about in a minute. Generally, it's just really nice. So the steering's very light, but you still feel confidence in how much grip the car's got. It's all pretty decent, to be honest. As you'd expect, brake regeneration, you control it via the paddles on the steering wheel. It's my favourite brake regen system because it's really adjustable, really easy to control, and you can use it to slow your descent on a hill or whatever. It's just really easy to have it as you wish. So you can toggle through your 3 different brake level modes. You can have it adaptive or not, whatever. It's all good. I just think it's a really nice, straightforward, comfy family car, and that's absolutely fine. Yes, it's got 201 brake. That used to be sort of hot hatch stuff, didn't it? But not really anymore. So 7.7 seconds to 62. It's more than fast enough. If you really sort of put your foot flat to the floor, it does pick up pretty well. But in the vast majority of, you know, uses, you're going to have it in one of the standard drive modes, and actually the acceleration feels pretty modest, but more than enough. That's the thing about this car. I have to say, there's nothing special about it. It doesn't, you know, it's not really exciting. It just does everything really nicely. It's just very smooth, easy to get on with, and I rather like it. As for real world range, we saw 3.4 miles per kilowatt hour, which is really quite decent efficiency for a chilly day, and will get you a real world range of 217 miles from the Kia's 64 kilowatt hour battery. We'd expect to see up to 270 miles depending on the temperature and how you're driving. Both the Honda and the Kia charge at just under 80 kilowatts when plugged into a DC rapid charger, which is good for a 10 to 80% top up in around 45 minutes. That's a fair bit slower than rivals including the Skoda Enyaq iV, and a lot slower than the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Tesla Model Y. So the Honda gets much the same power and performance as the Kia, so you're talking 201 brake and 0 to 62 in 7.8 seconds. It is also, interestingly, on the same tyres, so Continental Eco Contacts, but you've got 18-inch wheels on this high-spec car. But it does seem to struggle for traction a bit, the Honda, so you do get quite a lot of wheel spin if you're coming out of a junction and that kind of thing. More, I feel, than you do in the Kia, for sure. Other than that, I do think the Honda drives quite nicely. The ride's really nicely set up, so it never gets too jarring over potholes. It does feel reasonably heavy, and you get a bit of suspension noise through the cabin, but it's really not too bad. It's just generally quite a smooth, chilled, relaxing car, which is exactly what people are going to want. I actually feel like Honda's neutered the acceleration in the NY1 more than Kia has in the Niro, even if you really kind of go for it. It takes a bit of time to kind of pick up and get a little bit of wheel spin there too. So don't get me wrong, more than enough acceleration for your everyday stuff. So if you go for the top spec Honda, you also get a semi-autonomous park assist system, so it will steer and steer you into the parking space for you and all of that stuff. So, you know, you've got all of the safety features that you want in this car. I do wish that lane keep assist were a bit easier to turn it off. You can turn it off, you have to go through various sub-menus on the screen behind the wheel using the steering wheel. In the Kia, you can just turn it off by holding a button on the steering wheel, and I think that's really good. I think it's really important these days that you can turn lane keep assist off and on really easily. Other than that, I really, I think the Honda does drive how you want it to. It's comfy, visibility is actually really good, and it's a really nice thing to drive. It is pretty uninspiring, but it does everything you want it to. Oh, and I would add, brake regen, you can also control that in the Honda on the paddles, which is useful. I like being able to do all of that. Like I said, because it means you can use brake regen for, You can up the regen when you're going down a hill, or you can have it off or really turn it right down when you're on the motorway, all these kind of things. Makes it much more useful if you can vary it more easily. It steers really nicely as well, the Honda. It's got a little bit more weight to the steering than the Kia, but it still feels perfectly good for sort of really wieldy actually around town. It's just exactly the right sort of steering speed and steering weight. I think that's a really nice balance there. Of course, you've got your drive modes. In truth, you know, I've had it in econ mode most of the time and it's been absolutely fine, or normal. You've got sport, but I mean, really, it's just not a car that feels like it needs a sport mode at all. Generally, I actually do think the Honda drives quite well. As for the real-world range in the Honda, well, we found it really rather inefficient during our test over varied roads in 12 degrees and wet conditions, when it managed only 2.7 miles per kilowatt hour. That's good for 167 miles of real-world range from the 61.9 kilowatt hour usable battery. Expect that to nudge up to over 200 miles in the summer. Which one of these two is best then? Well, we would definitely go for the Kia Niro EV. Stick to a mid-spec and you keep those prices and the finance down. It is disappointing that Kia's not better on that front, but the range is good and it is just a really nice family EV, definitely one of the better in the class. The Honda, well, you know, it is expensive given that you can't even get it with less equipment and a lower price, but that 5 years free servicing, roadside warranty and all of that stuff is really compelling, so I can see why you would. But I think in this class, ultimately, it's got to be said that neither of these are really top of the class. You've got to go for something like the Tesla Model Y, Hyundai Ioniq 5, or even the Skoda Enyaq iV for that. Head to cargurus.co.uk for a whole host of fantastic used cars, including loads of great electric cars. And while we've got you, please do like the video, subscribe to the CarGurus UK YouTube channel, and of course, turn your notifications on so that you don't miss any of our videos.